Good evening, viewers, and welcome to another session of Mazungumzo. This is your host, Dr. Gilbert Gisharu Githere. Now, we have been covering being on time, and now time has come, we are going to turn a little bit into Roti, who has been the center of my discussion and everything. And look at his book, Philosophy and the Mirror of Nature. And this will be an analysis by me. And this will be like part 26, because we have almost finished covering being on time, because we have just reached the point where we are going to deal with time, being on time, and the end, the infinite, the finiteness of human beings, where the time keeps on going, you get older, you're acquiring knowledge, and in the end you come to your maker, the end of your life, and time stops and the spirit takes over. That's an interesting concept that Martin Heidegger had to wind up being on time, that we come to the end of our life and we die. Now, Richard Rorty had a very interesting life, and he's the one in 1979 wrote this book, Philosophy and the Mirror of Nature. And it turned philosophy topsy-turvy on its head, because he proved that a philosophy is not the knower. It's not this one which seeks for truth to validate our knowledge. And it is not our vehicle to knowledge. Language is. And Rorty took a lot of time in discussing all philosophers that have been, starting with Aristotle with reason and search for truth through reason. And knowledge was acquired through reasoning and logic and arguments. The Aristotelian belief, Plato, Socrates, mental gymnastics, and that became the, you'll excuse me, there is this concept which is coming in and erasing or typing things, and I'm trying to remove them. So Richard Rorty, in this book, he covers the Greek philosophers, Parmenides, and the taking care of the self. And then he looks at people like René Descartes, Sartre, not Sartre very much, Jacques Derrida. And in covering René Descartes in the 17th century, because the Greek philosophy of using reason to get to truth and to get into knowledge by being a virtuous citizen kind of comes to question after René Descartes wrote the piece on res existentia and res cognitus. We think, so we are. The extensia, that's the outside, the object, nature and God. And then he covered things like res cognitus in the book, The Meditation. And from there, body and mind, the dualism of body and mind becomes the issue with philosophers. It becomes the center of argument. And throughout the 17th century up to now, the aspect of our body and mind being the center of knowledge has been of contention. May it be skepticism, holomorphics, Phrenios, Parmenides and all concept. But we reach the 12th century Sir Francis Bacon, for example, because this is just an intro. In the 12th century, Sir Francis Bacon, who was a great British philosopher, he discusses the idea that human beings, are creatures of their environment. Most of the things they perpetuate and discuss, they are influenced by the environment. Some of it is correct. Some of it, they are very wrong. And idols, he considers idols. We idolize philosophers. We idolize theater. We idolize, the things we see around us. And he discusses that the influence and these things that you either perceive and believe in them, you hear people philosophers talk about them, you hear the way you are brought up, your education and your experience, it makes you have a certain kind of beliefs and inclinations or how you believe what is true. He says these things actually they create a lot of misinformation. And he says it is through sciences, observation, experiments, and experience and everything, and then you actually decipher objects through sciences. That is the best form of knowledge. And that is Sir Bacon. So he's one of the people who actually modern philosophy or modern sciences leads our knowledge, epistemology. And he says that he actually was of the belief that we should use science to lead our knowledge. And that's one aspect. And the aspect of body and mind, he was kind of, he questioned the idea of that in our minds, the ideas come from outside. And they are a spiritual aspect of nature that brings into our minds ideas. And then the ideas that we get into our minds help us to understand the outside. That is René Descartes. And the ghost in the machine, I think that is either John Searle, and that the ideas that we have, if you went into our brain, in our minds and the brain, it'd be like a big factory, and it's like a machine, and the ideas are being churned there, and then they help us to understand the outside nature. That is, and now there's somebody like Lebanese. Lebanese is discussed by R.Rorty extensively. Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. I think that is his full name. I might, because most of the Germans tend to be called either Gottfried, Gottlieb, Wilhelm, and then their name. I haven't really checked what is the source of that kind of belief. But Leibniz he believed that they are these indivisible, tiny material things that actually I think is a nano is a nano actually projection, because you remember Leibniz was the one who also perpetuated the binary, the 1 and 0 being the basis of our computation of the computer. He's, apart from Turing, the computer aspect of a logarithm comes from Leibniz, but he had that nomads, those invisible tiny pieces of life that are invisible, indivisible, very tiny. They are the ones which form our reality. They form nature. And if you look at the nanotechnology, then you kind of start to see, oh, Leibniz was ahead of his time. So also, Rorty visits with Leibniz. He also visits with Spinoza. Spinoza was of the idea that all substances actually are a reflection of God. With him, the body and mind thing, he kind of was not a contributor of it. He believed that everything you see around is a reflection of godliness. And that was his belief. And these people are the ones, I'm just going through that and kind of like a small intro. Because if I read now the way I do it, I go, Richard wrote his philosophy in the book, Richard wrote his Philosophy and the Mirror of Nature, was a groundbreaking work published in 1979. The main idea behind this book was to challenge the traditional view of philosophy as a search for objective foundational truths about the world. Rorty argued against the idea that language and representation could accurately mirror an independently existing reality. That means reality is not part of our language. That means it is separate. And he say we jump out of language and reality will be somewhere that language and presentation will make us see that is reality. You can touch it. He says that can never be. Language is actually the basis of reality. All reality is actually a language game. That is Wittgenstein language game. That everything that we innovate or help human beings to exist, and they have discovered them and concealed them from nature, is all an aspect of language, communication. It is, and he was very firm on that. Instead, he advocated for a more pragmatic approach to philosophy, where the focus shifted towards understanding how language and concept function within specific social and historical contexts. Rorty believed that our descriptions of reality are contingent on our linguistic practices and cultural frameworks, rather than being reflection of an external and changing reality. It's very, very beautiful concept. In essence, Rorty's work emphasized the importance of language, conversation, and social practices in shaping our understanding of the world. And he proposed a shift away from the pursuit of foundational knowledge towards a more contextual and contingent understanding of truth and meaning. Richard Rorty opens his book with topic of the invention of the mind, criteria of the mental. That's where he starts his work. And now that we have dealt with being and time, we are coming now to Rorty. This is another, he's looking at our knowledge. and our existence, that the most prime thing is language. And you can see Martin Heidegger looks existence is the most essential thing for human beings. And he wants to see the entities who help a Dasein to exist. But R.Rorty is saying language is the prime. This basically meant he started this book with René Descartes' philosophy of body and mind. Because you see, he's going to take every philosopher, may it be Rudolf Carnap, may it be Gottlieb Frege, may it be Ludwig Wittgenstein, Whitehead, Charles P.S. Sanders, John Searle, Hilary Putnam. He takes all these philosophers and Davidson, who believe there's no consciousness is not as vital as people make it to be. And he churns this yarn out, spreads it out into its own, each single string of philosophy. May it be Sellars, Cholson Sellars, may it be Saul Kripke. He kind of churns them apart, puts them, every piece of every philosopher, he puts it out there and looks at it, and he kind of proves beyond reasonable doubt that actually philosophy is not the tool to use to give us knowledge or to verify our knowledge. It's not the knower of truth. No, language is the prime. And you see, Martin Heidegger says language is the house of being, or the home of being. Being cannot be there without language. So let me just kind of, this basically meant, humans divide the world into two parts. This is when it comes to the concept of mind. These are physical and mental things. That's what human beings divide the world into. There are those things we think in our mind, and they are the physical thing outside our minds. And we ourselves are part of the physical. Gilbert Ryle, a British philosopher, R.Rorty also deals with Ryle. When looking at the Cartesian dualism of body and mind, did not agree with it and referred to it as a ghost in the machine. Sorry, I had contributed this one to John Searle. No, it's Ryle, a ghost in the machine. That if you went into human brain and you will find, this is René Descartes' dualism of ideas, that ideas come from the mind. And the factory of these ideas is our minds. And if you went, you'll find like a printing press where there are many small people arranging text, ideas into thought, into concept, into intuitions. And then they come out as innovations. They come out as essences, a glassy essence. That's where the title actually, Philosophy and the Mirror of Nature, comes from. It comes from the glassy essence. The idea being that there were small men in the heads of human beings manipulating ideas, like they were typesetting a little machine in a printing, so it making ideas and sense. That's Ryle. Instead, Ryle believed The whole story was the development of behavior as a result of nature and nature. Now you can see Ryle, and I think Ryle was closer to Sir Bacon. Sir Francis Bacon was also of the idea we are creatures of nature and nature. We learn things from our environment, but at the same time, we learn so much from our peers, our parents, our communities, our religion, our cultures, and they influence us. Some of it wrongly, misinformation. So misinformation has been with us long, and we try to fight it. So you find QAnon, the people who spread rumors about things and misinformation. They're not a new concept. Bacon discussed that misinformers are part of our society. We got to reveal them, and we have got to ignore them. They are there. And there are some philosophical concepts. Even sometimes I might say something, you go to double check it and make sure it's a fact, and the figures I'm giving and everything and the logic I'm using and the reasoning, it's okay. Because they're there, and Bacon agrees with Ryle. At this point, one can already see different arguments and point of views being given by different philosophers. This behavior has continued up to today. R.Rorty himself in this analysis divides the concept into body and mind, and he has the following concepts about the mind. He has, for example, he perpetuates, that there are images, there are images in our brains. And simulacra, the book 1983 by Bourriard, Jean-Jacques Bourriard, is a simulacra. Images are what image is the king now, because computer, there's nothing in computer but images and reproduction of images and creation of hyperreality. And that is images that also you can see here. R.Rorty is discussing about pain, stomach contractions, the origins of pain, moods, and lastly but not the least, sentences. This in another name are referred to as non-mental. So he divides the mind and the body into the non-mental and mental. And then there are mental states. And he dreams, hallucinations, beliefs, attitudes, desires, and intentions. And intentions, you can see somebody like Franz Brenton. We're going to meet him later. He says all the things that we talk about before they are intended in our minds. Before we do something, we have intentions. And then we react about our intentions. And that is the concept, the theory of intentionality. That partly our knowledge, we have got to thank intentions. Because without intentions, we will not be able to acquire knowledge. And R.Rorty challenges that. He challenges things like foundationalism. That there are things inherently in knowledge, they are based on some foundation. That's where the truths come from. And justifications. Some beliefs are based on some justified truths. And that's how they become our knowledge. he refutes that vehemently. According to R.Rorty and Wittgenstein, and one thing R.Rorty does, he respects Wittgenstein, Ludwig Wittgenstein. He believes he's actually the most important philosopher when it comes to knowledge. And he believes in that because Wittgenstein, in his book Tractatus, he actually comes up with the concept of language game. Language is like a game. It has rules. A game like cricket has rules different from soccer or different from American football. When you're playing it, you go to play by the rules of that game. And language is like that. It sets up rules for, if you are talking about economics, Milton Friedman, or you are talking about Schultz, or you are talking about biology, you're talking about chemistry, you got to use the correct terminologies for these disciplines. So language is like a game. It creates rules for different disciplines. And Michael Foucault, in his book, The Archaeology of Language, he kind of discusses that extensively. According to R.Rorty and Wittgenstein and other philosophers, call this idea of Cartesian dualism body organisms, for example, the brain, or holistically, the nervous system of the human body. That is the whole concept of body and mind, is that people had not really come to understand neurons, synapses, the nervous system of the body, and how chemical and electrical impulses create the communication we have in our body, even to allow us to vocalize things. By that time of 17th century, that was not really a concept which had come as close as being identified. Neurophysics and neurobiology, and all these studies that now are bringing us closer to understand that our nervous system is what actually allows us to communicate. But that's a deeper subject. I don't want to go into it right now because it involves artificial intelligence. Descartes had classified the physical and the mental state as extended, res extensa, res extensia, outside, extended, and the thinking, non-extended, res cognitus, the thinking. The two states were empirically unbridgeable. The mental state is a disposition rather than a neuron state. Mind involves broader concepts, for example, consciousness, cognition, subjective experience. This also includes thoughts, emotions, perceptions, memories, decisions, problem solving. The mind is said to be the seat of consciousness and awareness. The mind. And the mind, when you think about it, it's an abstraction. It's almost, in Hegelian terms, a consciousness is dialectical. Mental state is an adjective, a process, or a status. It pertains to 1. Activities, 2. Processes, and 3. Conditions related to the mind. Mind is an intangible complex, non-material or physical. It governs our thoughts, consciousness, and emotions. Rorty, in discussing the body and mind concept, he used history to trace the arguments that came before him. He, for example, revisited Spinoza. You remember I introduced that aspect that Rorty into discussing that philosophers are not the knower and keepers of truth, neither is it the pillar or the foundation of knowledge. Rather, it is language which has that capabilities. He had to study all philosophers that came before him and up to the time he was living. He died in 2207. Yeah, I think I remain to be corrected. I think he passed on. And so he, for example, visited with someone like Spinoza, double aspect theory. In his book entitled Ethics, he established the concept of parallelism doctrine. This meant body and mind are parallel expression of this fundamental substance of God and nature. And a change in one reflects a change in other. So that the universe is actually, in essence of Spinoza, God, is a reflection of God, which sometimes I think even Martin Heidegger, because he said time stops when we come to the end of our finiteness, is a coming to stop of time. Time and space makes us living creatures. Once time stops, your soul stops, and it becomes a spirit. He contributed to monism, the theory which stated that the universe was a reflection of God. Monism. Powerful statement there. Spinoza. Spinoza did not believe in Cartesian dualism. That is why he came up with a different explanation of it. Rorty at the same time brought in Gottlieb Wilhelm Leibniz with his theory of monads, which is indivisible immaterial substance, which he says are a basis of reality. So you can see Rorty is revisiting many philosophers. In his book, Philosophy and the Mirror of Nature, Rorty visits with almost every philosopher in the West. He doesn't go into Confucianism or Hinduism. He actually churns out the Western philosophy. Hilary Putnam, Davidson. He also revisits people like Appiah, somebody like Cornel West, but he doesn't mention them by name. He mentions the concept they have perpetuated over years, some of their beliefs and teachings. He revisits with them. He visits even with somebody like Molefi Asante. Because all these people like Afrocentrism, it also touches on dualism, which is Rene Cartesian, is Cartesians. According to Leibniz, monads exist in harmony throughout the whole universe. He believed in moral responsibility. Spirituality and the existence of the Judeo-Christian belief. Laws of nature, Spinozian, make things happen. Human freedom is a work of laws of nature. That is Rawlsian. John Rawls, the guru from Harvard, a theory of justice. Lebanese also was a believer that human beings are born with some formed ideas, innate ideas. Now you can see a ghost in the machine, Ryle. You know, I touched on him earlier. Lebanese is almost going to that there are innate ideas. And Kant, Immanuel Kant, a perception is innate ideas that a child is born with. Sometimes because we are creatures of information, we are wired up in the essence of information, wired in the electrons. Information is nothing but us. Our whole body is a parcel of information. That's a deeper concept of artificial intelligence and how we're reproducing that information that forms us. We are trying to replicate it in the computer world, artificial intelligence, ChatGPT. You know, that is a transformer for text and a generator. That's a discussion for another time. Lebanese also was a believer that human beings are born with form. Okay, he also believed that epistemology was based on geometrical theories and propositions emanate from axioms, formulas. That is Vienna Circle right there. Wittgenstein, Rudolf Carnap, Frege, Whitehead, Charles Sanders Peirce, Omar Van Quine, Dewey, Martin Heidegger himself, what's this guy? Derrida, Jacques Derrida, the deconstructionist. Lebanese also contribute to the idea that our earth is special, and God made it so. Our earth is in His reflection. We are actually created in the image of God. Yeah. Sometimes when you go into deep thinking, you just realize, yes, this sometimes it ends up into that. Other philosophers that R.Rorty revisits in his book are Charles Sellers. He was called Charles. Franz Brentano. You can see he lived in 1839, 1917. So that's an old philosopher. But Sellers is our contemporary. He died in 1977. So he lived during R.Rorty's time. So he visits one old philosopher, Brentano, and he visits with a very, very Sellers. Brentano is associated all human body and mind activities to intentionality. I touched on it when I was opening in the intro. Intention is a concept that many philosophers have covered because they tend to think it plays part in a way we acquire knowledge. The way we acquire knowledge, intentionality plays a part. I have done 39 minutes. I'm going to continue a little because this is an interesting subject. It's a bit away from the very mental gymnastics of Martin Heidegger. Temporality, temporalizing, making present, existential, ontological, phenomenological constitutions. It's a mouthful. At least R.Rorty, he is kind of difficult also to comprehend, but once you start to see his concept, you can revisit them even through other philosophers that he has analyzed, because he is refuting their premise. So that's why I'm bringing them now, just to kind of bring them at the front of your mind. And then he will chant them and kind of refute what they're trying to convey. All emotions, perceptions, or thought are directed to objects. And according to Brentano, the intentions were towards objects. He has contributed a lot to the mental and the physical aspects of the mind. He coined the statement, intentionality is the mark of the mental. That is Brentano, an authority which is respected. As R.Rorty continued to analyze the weakness in body and mind theory by René Descartes, he borrowed ideas from Wilfrid Sellars Chisholm. And you can see, he lived from 1916, he was born, and he died wrong, I remain to be corrected. He didn't die in 1970, he died in 1999, just the other day before the turn of the century. Sellars was interested in studying epistemology and metaphysics, how we acquire knowledge, epistemology, pedagogy, teachings, and all metaphysics, you know. That plays a very big part in algorithms, metaphysics, but that's a discussion for another day. He believed in the factionalism of beliefs. One belief rests on another. He also believed in justification, some being self-evident and incorrigible. Now, you might ask yourself at this point, why am I revisiting this point? These are facts and essences and entities that R.Rorty dealt with in his book, Being and Time. And in this section of the criteria of the mind, of the mental, is actually all I'm saying is in that discussion. But I'm just trying to make it more palatable, more consumable by a person listening to me. R.Rorty also, in challenging Cartesian dualism, he borrowed ideas from P.F. Strawson. Strawson believed in looking at reality from a language and personhood angle. So you can see, there are people who believe that we should give credit to language in the knowledge that we have. All the knowledge of human beings, existence of human beings, consciousness of human beings, intentionalities of human beings, intuitions of human beings, concepts of human beings, and cognitions, they are all a variable of language. They are not a variable of philosophy. And this thing actually vindicates the indigenous people. That's another subject for another day. Because you see, this one I did because I wanted to see, is it true that without the colonizers, the indigenous people would never have been in the 21st century able to acquire knowledge, to, for example, have a comprehensive irrigation system for their farms, hybrid seeds that will increase production? Could they have better toilets as time progressed without the influence of the West? Obviously, the fact is they were going to be developed people. Acquire knowledge might be to the level of whoever you can think of. Human beings, because they have a language, they are able to acquire ample knowledge and of the highest level. That's why the pyramids were built by Africans. And that's a subject for another day, because language proves it could have, it's true. Human beings go from knowledge to ignorance, and then from ignorance to knowledge again. History proves that. They toggle between these two. If they play around with democracy, democracy goes away. It has got to be protected. It has got to be nurtured. It has got to be improved on. It has got to be added in knowledge, democracy. Otherwise, you play with it, it goes away. It's not a God-given fact that the US will always remain democratic. No. If they don't nurture and protect